Here now is Charles Krauthammer, a syndicated columnist and a Fox News contributor, and the author of a best-selling book called Things That Matter. And I wonder, Charles, as you looked at this important meeting and a lot of build-up to it, what mattered most for both of these leaders today?
There was really only one issue on the table that could be really addressed. That was Syria, and that did turn out to be the case. The idea about adjudicating the meddling in the 2016 election was always going to be farcical. Putin is a KGB agent. He's a liar. He would never admit to anything. So that was not going to go anywhere. I think what was important is that our president would say, we know what you did, don't do it again, or you're going to suffer, and we don't have to say what it's going to be. That's the message. That could take a minute and a half. So I don't know how long was spent on it, and I don't believe a word of the Russian readout. But that was never going to be a resolvable issue. The only issue that's really on the table between Russia and the U.S. that is one that has any promise is Syria. And the reason is that this is like Europe 1945. The enemy, in this case ISIS, is essentially defeated. It's a matter of time. And the U.S. and Russia, as way back then, have to decide what are going to be the post-war boundaries.
Right. What
are going to be the dividing lines? What are going to be the spheres of influence? So I think it's a good thing that they started with the southwest region, and they're talking about a ceasefire. And what that essentially means is that all sides are agreeing that some parts of Syria will remain in Assad's hands and some parts will not. The only thing that troubled me is that the Soviet foreign minister said this particular ceasefire will be policed by Russian military police. We have no business allowing them in this region, including at the city of Quneitra, which is right on the Golan, right on the border with Israel, Dera, which is right near Jordan. So if that is true, we gave up a lot. If that is not true, the beginning of the demarcation, the zones of influence, that's a good thing.
Isn't it really amazing how Putin, over and over again, he creates problems that then he looks like he is solving, and he gets back home the kudos for being really this great leader of the world, when actually he's the one doing a lot of the agitating.
You're exactly right, and what happened in this case in Syria is that he took advantage of the naivete and the passivity of President Barack Obama, who thought the Russian would step into a quagmire. He kept advising the Russians, don't go into Syria for your own interest. He didn't understand a thing. Putin went into the vacuum. He has an air base, he has a naval base, and now for the first time in 40 years, the Russians are in a position to dictate some of the terms. We have to accept that. That's water under the bridge, and that's what we're seeing now. How much of that region
is it fair for me to think that if we're making this agreement with Russia, in some ways we're also talking to Iran?
Well, I think that's our major interest. We can tolerate the Russians to some extent. We can tolerate Assad because he's a puppet. But the Russians have a big interest in giving Iran a big stake in the region. Our interest is to try to do everything to prevent that. So in the coming negotiations, as the ISIS forces are driven out of Mosul and then Raqqa, and all that territory is up for grabs, our interest is to make sure it does not fall into the hands of Iran or its Shiite militia proxies. That's what the big negotiations are going to be about. What we saw today about southwest Syria, where Iran is less involved, is less about that. So this is just the beginning, and this is the easy part.
And meanwhile, Charles, just a quick comment from you, if you could. Back here at home in Washington, D.C., they're still negotiating a sanctions package against Russia. Did you think that the White House indicated one way or the other and which way they're going to lean on that?
I think they really ought to acquiesce to the Congress. It does not look very good if they refuse sanctions overwhelmingly approved in the Senate, reflecting American public opinion. The Russians have shown their hand. Look at what they're doing on Korea. They've essentially said they're going to stop any initiative we make to impose new sanctions, which they can do. And as a result of that, we have to see them as an adversary, and if we can slap on sanctions, we should.
All right. Charles Krauthammer, thank you so much.